she will marry when I permit it, and I do not permit it, Sir Rowland Pruitt said, and he said it to the room rather than to her, as a man reads a verdict he has already written. The winter light came thin through the tall London windows, and it fell on the account books stacked at his elbow, and on the plain dove-gray gown that Marianne Ashcombe had worn for 3 years because he allowed her no other. "I have asked for nothing but an answer," she said. "Mr. Ferrars called 4 times. You turned him at the door each time and did not tell me." "Mr. Ferrars is a curate with 200 a year and a mother to keep," Sir Rowland said. "You are a ward in Chancery. You are not a farthing of your own until I say the word, and I will not say it for a curate." "Then say it for whom?" "For no one. That is the answer you have asked for. Have it and be content." She stood very still. She had learned that stillness as other women learn needlework, from long practice and from the certainty that any other thing would be used against her. Her father had been dead 6 years. Her mother longer. The estate at Ashcombe and the funds that stood behind it and the £12,000 her grandfather had settled on her in the 3%. All of it sat under the eye of the court, and the court had given the keeping of it, and the keeping of her, to the man across the desk. He had been her father's cousin. He had wept very handsomely at the funeral. He had not wept since. "You examine the books every quarter," she said. "I have seen the examiner's man come and go. Might I not see them too? They are my books, sir, when all is said. They are the court's books, and mine to answer for, and they are no reading for a young woman with a head full of curates." He drew the topmost ledger toward him and laid his hand flat upon it, as a man lays his hand on a Bible to be believed. "You will find, Marianne, that the world is not arranged for your comfort. I did not arrange it. I only keep it in good order until you are of an age the court thinks fit, and the court, thank God, is in no hurry. I am 24, and unmarried and unlikely and provided for. Count your blessings by that fire and leave the counting of pounds to me." "I should like to count them once," she said, "if only to know how many there are." "You have no head for it." "Then teach me the head for it, sir, and be rid of the trouble of me the sooner. A ward who can keep her own accounts is a ward off your hands." "A ward who keeps her own accounts," said Sir Rowland, "is a ward with an opinion, and I have never yet met the opinion in a young woman that did not cost her guardian money." "No, you will not read the books. You will not marry the curate. You will sit by the fire I am generous enough to allow you, and you will thank the God who made you an heiress instead of a governess. For a governess at least must earn her bread, and you are spared even that indignity. You call it generous. 3 coals to a grate. I call it prudent. There is a difference, though a woman seldom sees it. Prudence is love that has learned arithmetic." He was pleased with the phrase. She saw him be pleased with it. "Then it is a strange love," she said, "that grows richer the colder its object grows. I have watched your fires in Bruton Street, sir, blaze up the chimney of a January night while mine went out. If that is prudence, I do not wonder the poor die of it." For one instant something crossed his face that was not comfortable, and then it was gone, and he was the guardian again. "You have a tongue," he said. "The one thing your father left you that I could not put in a strong box. Guard it, Marianne. A sharp tongue in a poor woman is wit. In a rich one it is a scandal, and you are neither, just now, but only mine." Mrs. Tolliver came in then with the tea things, and she set them down with the small pointed clatter of a woman who has heard everything and approved of the master's part. She was the companion Sir Rowland paid to watch her, and she watched her now over the rim of the pot. "Shall I pour, Miss Ashcombe?" Mrs. Tolliver said. "Or are we too grand for tea this morning?" "You may pour," Marianne said. "I find I have no quarrel with the tea." Sir Rowland almost smiled at that. He liked her spirit as a man likes a spirited horse he has already broken, as something to be admired from a great and untroubled distance. He turned back to his books, and the matter was closed, and the light moved on the desk, and that, he believed, was the shape of every morning she would ever have. He was wrong, though he would not learn how wrong for some weeks yet, and the beginning of his being wrong arrived that same afternoon in the form of a letter with the seal of a master in chancery upon it. Sir Rowland broke the seal at his desk with Marianne standing by, because he had a habit of doing his correspondence before his ward as another man might do it before a spaniel, as a thing that heard but did not signify. She saw the color go out of his face by degrees as water goes out of a jug. "What is it?" said Mrs. Tolliver. "An examination," Sir Rowland said. "A full examination of the wardship accounts. Not the clerk this time. A man of the master's own choosing, come down to sit here and go through every year of it, page by page." "Every year of it," said Mrs. Tolliver. "Whatever for?" The old clerk was content with a glance and a glass of Madeira. "The old clerk is dead, and this is his replacement, and the replacement wishes to make a name," Sir Rowland said, though his hand was not quite steady. "It is nothing. Some new broom fellow proving his zeal on a country wardship." He set the letter down. "It is nothing. It is form. They do it when a ward nears her majority, or when some busybody writes to the court. I keep good books. Let him come." "Who is the man?" Marianne asked. Sir Rowland looked at the signature as though it might tell him more than it did. "A Mr. Crail," he said. "I never heard the name." "Some dry stick of an examiner with ink for blood. He arrives Thursday, and he may sit in the small parlor, and he will find everything in order, and he will go away again, and that will be the last of it." He said the last of it twice, which was one time more than a confident man needs. Marianne said nothing, but something in her that had lain very quiet for 6 years under the dove gray lifted its head at the word examination, as a sleeping thing lifts its head at a footstep on the stair. Mr. Crail arrived on the Thursday, in a hired chaise, in a plain dark coat and boots that had walked further than a clerk's boots usually walk, and he carried his own document case and would not give it to the footman. Marianne saw him first from the landing window, and she watched him step down and stand a moment in the gray street looking up at the house, not as a tradesman looks up at a house he means to enter, but as a man looks at a thing he means to weigh. He was perhaps 34. Dark hair swept back, a little disordered by the road. A square jaw, dark with the day's travel. And when the footman opened to him, he came in without hurry, and he took off his hat, and his eyes went once around the cold hall, the smoking fire, the shabby hangings that Sir Rowland kept, because the ward's comfort was not a charge he cared to enter, and something passed over his face and was gone. Sir Rowland received him in the study with a great show of welcome. "Mr. Crail, you are prompt, sir. I honor a prompt man. You will take wine after your journey." "Water, if the house has it, Mr. Crail said. "I keep a clear head for figures. I find wine and columns do not sit together." He said this last as a small joke he had made before. His voice was low and even, and it had under it, very faint, the print of a school no clerk ever attended. But Sir Rowland's ear was not fine enough to catch it. "You have the books ready, I hope. The master would have me lose no time." "Every book, every voucher. I have kept them as a churchwarden keeps a parish, sir, to the ha'penny." "That is well," Mr. Crail said, For a penny out is a lie, and a lie in an account is only a small theft that has not yet grown up. He said it pleasantly, and he smiled while he said it, and Sir Rowland laughed a little too loudly and did not smile at all. Marianne was presented to him in the hall as the household passed to dinner, and she made her curtsy, and Mr. Crail bowed, and for a moment his eyes rested on her a fraction longer than the moment allowed. "You are the ward," he said. "I am the account, sir," she answered, before she had decided to. "Everything in this house is kept for me, and nothing is given to me. You have come to read me. I hope I make better sense on the page than I have been let make in the parlor." Sir Rowland's head came round sharply. "Marianne, forgive me," she said, and dropped her eyes, and was the dove-gray ward again. But Mr. Crail had heard it, and things he heard he was not in the habit of forgetting. "I read carefully, Miss Ashcombe," he said. "Whatever is truly there I shall find. Whatever is not there, I shall find that too. It is the second that takes the longer." And he bowed again and went into the water Sir Rowland had grudged him. That night Marianne could not sleep for the strangeness of it. A man had come into the house who could not be turned at the door, who had a right to the books she had been forbidden, who had looked at her cold hearth as though the cold of it were an entry he meant to make. She rose and wrapped herself and went down for a candle she did not need, and she found the small parlor lit, and Mr. Crail within it, at the table they had given him, the first ledger open before him and his pen going. "I did not mean to disturb you," she said from the door. "You have not," he said without looking up. Then he did look up. "You do not sleep either. I have not slept well in 6 years. I did not know it showed. It does not. I guessed." He set down his pen. "Sit, if you like. It is your account. There is a chair." She sat. On the table between them the ledger lay open, Sir Rowland's neat hand marching down the page, and she looked at it as a starving woman looks at bread behind glass. "May I ask you a thing, Mr. Crail, that a ward may not be let to ask? You may ask. Whether I answer is another matter. When you find a lie in an account as you said at dinner, how does it show? A lie must look very like the truth, or it would not be a lie." He was quiet a moment. "It looks like the truth from the front," he said. "It is the back that betrays it. A true account balances in 2 directions. Money that comes in must go somewhere, and somewhere must own it come. A false account balances only forward. The guardian writes down that he spent £40 on the roof of the tenant's barn, and the sum is neat and the total is neat, but you go to the barn, and the barn has no new roof, and you go to the joiner, and the joiner was never paid, and the £40 has gone nowhere in the world but into his own pocket, and left a beautiful clean figure to stand in the place where it was." He tapped the page, not on any line, only on the paper. "The books do not lie, Miss Ashcombe. The men who write them lie, and the books remember it whether the men like it or no." "Then you have only to go to the barns," she said. "I have only to go to the barns." He almost smiled. It is astonishing how few examiners do. She looked at him, at the plain dark coat and the document case he had carried in himself and set no servant's hand upon, and a thought came to her that she put away at once as too large for a ward to hold. "You are not much like the last examiner," she said. "No," said Mr. Crail. "I don't imagine I am." She came again the second night, and he made no move to send her away, and it became a thing without either of them agreeing that it should be. He worked, she sat, and between the columns of figures they talked, and the talk was the first she had had in 6 years that did not begin and end in what she was forbidden. "Tell me how a wardship comes to be," she said one night. "I have lived inside one since I was 18, and still the shape of the cage is a mystery to me. It is not meant that you should. That is half the cage." He laid down his pen. "When a person is left money and no one grown to manage it, the court takes them into its keeping, and the money too, and appoints a guardian to hold both until the person is judged fit to hold them alone. It is a kindness in the design. An orphan is not left to be robbed by the first cousin who calls. And who judges when I am fit? The court. And who tells the court? The guardian." She was quiet. "So the man who profits by my staying a child is the same man who tells the court whether I am grown." "Yes," said Mr. Crail, "that is a very great fault in a design that means to be a kindness." "It is the greatest fault in the whole of the law," he said, "and every man of sense has known it for 50 years, and nothing is done, because the wards are young and scattered and have no voice, and the guardians are grown and moneyed and dine with the men who might mend it. A ward is the only prisoner in England who pays her own gaoler and is told to be grateful for the lodging. You speak very hot for a dry examiner." He caught himself. "I have examined a great many wardships," he said, more carefully. "A man cannot read the same theft in 40 hands and stay cool about the 40th. 40, she said. "Then mine is one of a great crowd. Yours is one of a great crowd. That is the part that ought to move a government and does not. There is not a grasping guardian in England who invented his tricks. He learned them, as a boy learns a catechism from the guardian before him. The coal that is bought warm and burned cold. The barn re-roofed on paper and rotting in fact. The physician who never came. The land sold at half and entered at half of the half. I could recite the whole liturgy to you before I opened your books, and I should be wrong in not one particular." Marianne looked at the ledger and then at him. "You knew what you would find before you came. I knew the kind of thing. I did not know the amounts. The amounts are yours, Miss Ashcombe, and they are worse than most, because your guardian is cleverer than most and greedier than most, and those two seldom sit so comfortably in one man." He turned a page toward her and set his finger under a line and did not read it for her but let her look. "There, what do you make of that entry?" She bent over it. Her lips moved. "Repairs to the sea-wall at the Kentish farm. £60. "And what do you know of the Kentish farm?" "That we have no farm in Kent," she said slowly. "My father's land is all in Hampshire. There is no sea within 40 miles of any acre I own." "No," said Mr. Crail, and now for once she saw him truly smile, and it changed his whole grim face. "There is not." "You read very well, Miss Ashcombe, for a woman who was told she had no head for it. You found in 1 minute an entry his last 3 examiners passed in 6 years, a sea-wall in a county where you own no sea. Keep that. It is the first thing you have ever caught your guardian in, and it will not be the last, and I should like you to remember that you caught it yourself." She sat back. Something had happened to her that had not happened since her father died, which was that a person in the world had handed her a thing and said, "This is yours, and use it." She found she could not speak for a moment. "Why are you being kind to me?" she said at last. "Examiners are not kind. You said so yourself. You told me at dinner you kept a cool head for your figures." "A cool head for figures, yes," he agreed. "I did not say I keep a cold one for people. They are not the same discipline, though I grant you they look alike from the outside." He took the page gently back. "Go to bed, Miss Ashcombe. You have caught your guardian in a sea-wall. It is enough for one night. Sleep on it, and dream of Kent, and the tide that never came. He was in the house 11 days, and in those 11 days Marianne learned more of her own affairs by listening at the edges than she had learned in 6 years of being told the counting of money was no business of hers. She learned that Mr. Crail rose before the servants and walked out alone, and that when Sir Rowland asked where, Mr. Crail said only, "To look at the property, sir. One cannot examine a barn from a chair," and that Sir Rowland's laugh at this was a little thinner each morning. She learned that Mr. Crail asked for vouchers Sir Rowland could not at once find, and that the finding of them took Sir Rowland whole afternoons behind a locked door, and that the vouchers, when they came, were sometimes newer than the ink of 6 years ought to be. And she learned the taste of being spoken to as a person who might understand a thing, for Mr. Crail, when he found her near, did not send her from the room. "You keep a fire like a miser," he said to her one grey noon, standing before the study grate that Sir Rowland kept at 3 coals. "It is not my miserliness, sir. I am allowed 3 coals. My guardian says a warm ward grows idle." "Does he?" Mr. Crail looked at the fire, and then he looked at the ledger under his arm, and Marianne saw him make some small mark in his mind, as a man ties a knot in a handkerchief. "Tell me, Miss Ashcombe, in the winter of the year your father died, were you cold?" "I was a child. I do not remember being cold. I remember being warm. There were fires in every room. My father would not have a cold house. There is an entry," Mr. Crail said slowly, "for coal in every quarter since. A generous entry. The ward's comfort, it says." He was not quite looking at her. "Where do you suppose the coal goes that is bought for a warm ward and burned for a cold one?" Marianne's breath went very carefully. "I could not say, sir, no," he said, "but I begin to be able to." And he went into his figures. It was on the 9th day that the thing between them, which had been a matter of ledgers and cold fires and a shared wakefulness, became for one moment a matter of something else. Mrs. Tolliver had reported to Sir Rowland that the ward sat with the examiner of an evening, and Sir Rowland had forbidden it in a voice that carried up the stairs, and Marianne had come down white with the old helpless anger and found Mr. Crail in the hall with his hat, going out to walk as he did. "You should not sit with me," he said quietly, "for your own sake. He will make you pay for it in the only coin he has, which is the coin of your comfort, and I would not have you cold on my account. I have been cold on his account for 6 years, she said. I find I would rather be cold on my own, for once, for choosing to speak to the one person in this house who has not lied to me. That is a warmth of its own, sir, if you will forgive a foolish figure of speech." He looked at her then in a way that had nothing of the examiner in it, and for the length of 3 heartbeats, 1, 2, 3, neither of them said anything at all, and the cold hall was not cold. "It is not a foolish figure," he said. "It is the truest thing spoken in this house since I entered it." Then he put on his hat, and the examiner came back into his face, and he said, "I have 4 barns yet to see. Good night, Miss Ashcombe," and went out into the dark. She did not know who he was. She knew only that he was not what he seemed, and that whatever he was on her side, and after 6 years the difference between those 2 things did not seem to her worth the losing of sleep. She slept, that 9th night, better than she had slept in a great while. Sir Rowland was not a fool, and a man is never so dangerous as when his fear at last catches up with his greed. On the 10th day he tried first to buy the examiner, as he had bought so much else, and he did it in the study with the door not quite closed, so that Marianne, passing, heard the whole of it. You will find, Mr. Crail, that a wise man in your position is well used by the families he examines. A word in the right ear, an account passed clean, and the family does not forget it. I am not a rich man. This was a lie, and they both knew it was a lie, but I know how to be grateful. £200, sir, is a great deal to a clerk. There was a silence. Then Mr. Crail said, in the mildest voice in the world, "It is. And it is exactly the sum, Sir Rowland, that is missing from the ward's account for the year 1815, under the head of repairs. I had wondered where it went. I am obliged to you for showing me its habits. You mistake me, sir. I never mistake a bribe. It is the one thing in this work a man learns to know by its smell before its shape." A chair scraped. "Sit down, Sir Rowland. You have offered me the ward's own stolen money to be silent about the ward's own stolen money, and you have done it within the sound of the ward's own foot on the stair. I would not compound your folly by taking it. Sit down. We will go on with the books." Marianne went up the stairs with her hand pressed flat to her breast, and she did not know whether she was more frightened or more glad, and by the top of the stairs she knew it was glad, and the gladness frightened her more than the fear had. When buying failed, Sir Rowland turned to the other tool of desperate men, which is the poisoning of the well. He wrote to the master himself, over the examiner's head. Marianne learned the shape of the letter later, in open court, but its burden was this, that the examiner Crail had formed an improper attachment to the ward, that he sat with her unchaperoned by night, that his findings were therefore tainted by passion and could not be trusted, and that the court should recall him and send an honest man. It was a clever letter. It took the one true thing in the house, that the examiner and the ward had come to regard one another, and it turned that true thing into the discrediting of every figure Mr. Crail had found. Sir Rowland believed it would work. He believed it because in his world a great man will always protect his own comfort before a small woman's fortune, and he could not conceive of the world being arranged any other way. He did not know who Mr. Crail was. That was the whole of his error, and it was about to cost him everything. Mr. Crail finished his examination on the 11th day. He came to Sir Rowland in the study, and Marianne was sent for, which had never happened before. "I have done here," Mr. Crail said. "I return to the master with my findings. Miss Ashcombe's wardship account will be heard before the court in Lincoln's Inn on the last day of this month, and you, Sir Rowland, as guardian, will attend to answer for it. Miss Ashcombe, as the ward, has the right to attend also, and I would advise her to use it." "This is monstrous," Sir Rowland said. "I have written to the master concerning your conduct in this house. I do not doubt you will find yourself answering for something before I do." "I have no doubt of it either," Mr. Crail said. "A man in my position answers for a great many things. Good day to you both." And he took up the leather case he had never once let out of his own keeping, and he went out to the chaise, and he kept his eyes from Marianne as he went, and she understood that he did not dare to look, and the not daring told her more than a look would have. The Court of Chancery sat in the old hall at Lincoln's Inn, under a roof black with the smoke of centuries, and it was cold in there as it is cold in every place where money is weighed and no one is meant to be comfortable. Marianne came in her dove gray, because it was the only good gown she had, and she sat where the usher put her, on a hard bench at the side, a small plain woman that no one looked at twice. Sir Rowland came in his best, and he had brought a barrister, a smooth, loud man named Mr. Sillery, and he had brought Mrs. Tolliver to say what she had seen of the examiner and the ward, and he had the look of a man who has laid his stakes carefully and has only to watch them come home. The master in Chancery who was to hear it was an old man named Sir Edmund Vane, dry and slow and terrible in the way that only very fair men are terrible. And he opened the matter without ceremony. "We are come," said Sir Edmund, to examine the accounts kept over the guardianship of the ward before us, Miss Ashcombe, who has been in the hand of this court these 6 years. The examination was made by my examiner. I will have his findings read. Where is my examiner? Sir, said Mr. Sillery, rising, oiled and ready, before the findings are read, the guardian I represent has a matter that touches the findings at their root. He has written to this court, and I will read the letter, that the examiner in this case did form an attachment, unbecoming and improper, to the very ward whose fortune he was sent to weigh, and that he sat with her, alone, by candlelight, night upon night, so that his figures are not the cold work of an examiner, but the warm work of a suitor, and are worth no more than any lover's arithmetic. We say the examination is tainted. We say it must be set aside. We say the ward's own companion will swear to what she saw. A murmur went round the hall. Sir Rowland allowed himself, after 11 days of waiting, the beginning of a smile. That is a grave charge, said Sir Edmund, against my examiner. Mrs. Tolliver, is it? Stand and tell the court what you saw, and mind that you are on your oath. Mrs. Tolliver stood, and she told it well. The evenings in the parlor, the ward in her wrapper, the door closed, the candle low, and she made of it a picture that any hall would blush at. And when she had done, she sat with the small, pointed satisfaction of a woman who has served her master. Miss Ashcombe, said Sir Edmund, and no one in authority had spoken her name to her face in all her 6 years of wardship. You have heard it. Do you answer? Marianne stood. Her hands were folded, the thumb pressed flat, and she was aware of every eye now turning to the small gray woman they had not looked at twice. I answer that it is true I sat with the examiner, she said, and her voice was not loud, but it carried, and the murmur died to hear it. It is true I came down of an evening, in my wrapper because I have no other, and there was a fire in the parlor where the examiner worked, and there was a fire nowhere else in the house that my guardian keeps for me. It is true the door was closed against the draught. And it is true, my lord, that in those evenings the examiner told me nothing of himself, and asked me nothing improper, and taught me one thing only, which no one in 6 years had troubled to teach me. He taught me how to read an account. If the court will call that love, then I have been made love to by a ledger, and I am not ashamed of it, and I would do it again tomorrow. For it is the only honest instruction I have ever had under my guardian's roof. There was a silence in the hall of the particular kind that follows the truth when it is spoken plainly in a place built for lies. Where, said Sir Edmund quietly, is my examiner? And a door opened at the side of the hall. The man who came in was not in a plain dark coat. He came in the black velvet and the antique gold of his rank, with the high white cravat and the heavy signet on his hand, and he walked up the hall as a man walks who has never once in his life had to wait at a door. And the usher who had put Marianne on her hard bench went the color of the whitewash, and Mr. Sillery's mouth came open on a word he did not say, and Sir Rowland Pruitt rose halfway from his seat and then sat, because his knees had decided the matter for him. My lord, said Sir Edmund Vane, and he inclined his old dry head, the court is honored. The honor is the court's to keep or spend, the man said. I am here as a witness, Sir Edmund, and I will be sworn as one, and heard as one, and my rank may wait outside the door with my coachman. He turned, and at last, in that whole cold hall his eyes found Marianne, and they did not leave her as he spoke. My name, Miss Ashcombe, since it seems your guardian never troubled to tell you what manner of examiner sat at your table, is Herringworth, the Duke of Herringworth. And the man you knew as Mr. Crail, who could not examine a barn from a chair, was myself. Marianne did not sit down, because she had not been sitting, but the hall seemed to move a little under her, and she set her hand upon the rail. "You will wonder why," he said, still to her, though the whole hall strained to hear it. "The Court of Chancery has under its hands some hundreds of wards, Miss Ashcombe and their fortunes, and I have long thought that the men set to guard those fortunes are watched by clerks who can be bought for the price of a dinner. I asked the master's leave to examine one wardship myself, in my own person, as a plain man with no rank to flatter and no clerk's wage to tempt. Yours was the account that came first to my hand. I did not choose you. I chose the work." He paused. "That was true on the day I came down. It is not the whole truth now. But I will give the court the figures first, and the rest of the truth after, in its proper place. For a man should be believed on his evidence and not on his heart." "Give the court your findings, your grace," said Sir Edmund. And the Duke set his document case upon the table. The case he would not give a footman, and he opened it, and he took out Sir Rowland Pruitt's own account books, and he began to read them aloud. He did not make a speech. That was the terrible part of it, for Sir Rowland, who could have answered a speech. The Duke read figures. In the account for the year 1815, he said, under the head of repairs to the Ashcombe estate, the guardian enters £200 paid to one Josiah Mead, joiner, for the re-roofing of the home farm barn and the mending of 3 cottages. Here is the entry, in the guardian's hand. Here is the total, carried forward, neat and clean. He set the ledger down open where the master could see it, and took a paper from the case. And here is the sworn word of Josiah Mead, joiner, of Ashcombe, taken by me in his own kitchen, that he did no such work in that year, nor any year, was never asked to, and was never paid a shilling by Sir Rowland Pruitt in his life. The barn stands unroofed to this day. I have walked in it. The rain comes through. Mr. Sillery was on his feet. My lord, a single tradesman's memory, sit down, said Sir Edmund Vane without raising his voice, and Mr. Sillery sat. In the account for 1816, the Duke went on, and he turned a page. The guardian enters £180 for coal, for the comfort of the ward. In 17, the like. In 18, and 19, and every year since, the like, always for the comfort of the ward. He looked up, and his eyes went once, briefly, to the small gray figure at the rail, and came back to the book. The ward was allowed 3 coals to her grate. I counted them. I have the coal merchant's own book here beside the guardian's, and the coal merchant's book shows less than 1/3 of the coal the guardian charged the estate. The remainder was ordered, and paid for out of the ward's money, and delivered to Sir Rowland Pruitt's own house in Bruton Street, where I am told the fires are very fine. The murmur in the hall had a different note in it now. Sir Rowland's face had gone from white to a bad gray. In 1817, the Duke read, the guardian charges the ward's estate £40 for a physician in the ward's illness. The ward was not ill that year. I asked her. There is no physician in the county who attended her, for I have written to all 4, and here are their answers. The £40 bought no medicine. It bought the guardian a hunter, which I have also seen in his own stable a good bay of about that price. Sir Rowland could bear it no longer, and he came to his feet, and at last he spoke in his own defense, out loud, before the whole hall. This is a slander dressed as arithmetic, he said, and his voice was strong at first. A guardian is allowed his charges. The law permits a fair commission on the estate he keeps. Every figure his grace has read is a figure the law allowed me. I kept that girl fed and housed for 6 years out of the goodness of a cousin's heart, and this is my thanks, to be arraigned before you by a duke who played at being a clerk to trap an honest man." "You are permitted a commission," said the duke, and he did not raise his voice. "You are not permitted a hunter charged as a physician. Show me the ward's illness, Sir Roland, and I will strike the entry. Name the doctor, name the day, name the complaint she suffered of. You kept such careful books. Surely you can name the sickness that cost her 40 pounds. Sir Roland opened his mouth. "She had a fever," he said, "in the spring." "Which spring?" "The spring of that year, the 17. "Miss Ashcombe," said the Duke, not turning from Sir Roland, "were you ill in the spring of that year?" "I was not," said Marianne from the rail. "I have not had a fever since I was a child. I was never once attended by a physician under my guardian's roof, for a physician costs money, and my guardian did not spend money on me that he could enter and keep." "There," said the Duke, gently to Sir Roland. "You have named a spring and a fever, and the ward who did not have it stands 10 feet from you and says so on her honor. Will you name the doctor now? No? Then sit, sir. You defend yourself worse than you kept your books, and you kept them very ill." And Sir Roland sat, because there was nothing standing under him any longer, and the hall had heard him try and fail, in his own words, in real time, which is a harder thing to watch than any silence. He went on. He was pitiless in the way that only arithmetic can be pitiless, for there is no arguing with a sum, and no shaming it, and no charming it, and every figure he read was a small door closing until there were no doors left. Rents collected and not entered. A parcel of the ward's land sold and the price entered at half its worth. The other half gone into air. Interest on £12,000 in the 3%, £360 a year, of which the ward saw the price of a dove grey gown every 3rd year, and the guardian saw the rest. Year upon year, page upon page, the Duke read the theft of Marianne Ashcombe out of the mouth of the very man who committed it, in the man's own hand. And the man could say nothing, because the books were true, and the man who wrote them had lied, and the books remembered it whether he liked it or no. When at last the Duke closed the second ledger, the hall was so still that the fire in the great grate could be heard to shift. "That is my finding, Sir Edmund," he said. "I make it as a witness on my oath, and I have brought the vouchers, the tradesmen's books, the sworn words, and the physician's letters, so that the court need not take it on my rank but may take it on its evidence. The sum stolen from this ward over 6 years, with interest reckoned as the court reckons it, is above £4,000. It is all here. I have added it twice." Sir Edmund Vane looked at Sir Roland Pruitt for a long moment. "Have you anything to say," said the master, "that is not a lie I can check against these books?" Sir Roland opened his mouth. He was a man who had talked his way past a great deal in his life. But there was nothing in the room to talk to. There was only the arithmetic, sitting open on the table, and it did not care what he said. He shut his mouth again. "Then I will say it," said Sir Edmund. The master in Chancery did not raise his voice, and he was the more terrible for it. "The guardianship of Sir Roland Pruitt over the person and estate of Miss Marianne Ashcombe is dissolved from this hour," he said. "The ward is discharged from wardship being of full age, and her estate is restored to her own hand. Sir Roland Pruitt will make good to her, out of his own property, every shilling this examination has shown to be taken, with the interest, and the court will see it done though it strip his house to do it. And the charge of impropriety he laid against my examiner I find to be a false accusation, sworn to falsely and made to cover a theft. I will consider by the next term whether it is a matter for more than this court. Take him out. They took him out. Mrs. Tolliver went with him, uninvited, and no one stayed her, for she had nowhere else in the world to go now, and that was justice of a rough kind, too. And Marianne Ashcombe stood at the rail in her dove gray, £4,000 and 6 years to the good, her fortune her own, her name her own, no man's ward and no man's account. And she found that she was weeping, and that she did not in the least care who saw it. The hall emptied by degrees. Sir Edmund gathered his papers and, passing her, paused. "You read your own account very ill, Miss Ashcombe, all these years," he said, not unkindly, "for want of anyone to teach you. You answered it very well today. Go home. You have a home now, and money to warm it, and I hope to God you burn a great deal of coal." And the dry old man went out, and she thought she saw the ghost of something like a smile. Then the hall was empty but for the two of them. Herringworth stood by the table with his case, and he made no move to come to her, and she understood that he would not, that having read her fortune back to her, he would not now presume upon it, and that the next step, if there was to be one, was hers to take or leave, for he had been most careful to give her back to herself before he said one word of himself. She crossed the cold flagstones to him. "You said," she began, and found her voice unsteady, and mastered it, "you said you would give the truth after, in its proper place. Is this its proper place, your grace, or have I still further to walk?" "You have no further to walk," he said. "You need never walk anywhere at another's bidding again. That was the whole of my purpose, and it is done." He set down the case. "But you asked for the rest of the truth, and you have bought the right to it dearer than anyone, so I will pay it. I came to your account, Miss Ashcombe, because it was the work. I stayed at it, long past the day the theft was plain to me, because of you. I could have laid this before the court a week sooner. I did not. I told myself I wanted the joiner's words set down fair and the physician's letters all in hand, and that was true, and it was also an excuse. For the plain truth is that I did not want to leave the one cold house in England where a woman spoke to me as though I were a man and not a rank. I have been made much of all my life for what I was born. You made something of me for what I said across a table by 3 coals of fire. I find I cannot go back to being made much of by anyone else." "You knew who you were the whole while," she said. "You let me speak to a nobody. I let you speak to a man," he said. "The nobody was the disguise. The man was not. And every word you said to me across those 3 coals of fire," she said, "was it Mr. Crail who said it? Or the Duke?" "There is no Mr. Crail," he said. "There never was. There is only a man who has spent his whole life being answered before he has finished speaking, being agreed with before he has said a wise thing or a foolish one, and who came into a cold house as a nobody and found, for 11 nights, a woman who argued with him. Do you know how rare that is, Miss Ashcombe, to a man of my rank? To be contradicted? To be corrected on a point of law by a ward in a wrapper who had never been read a page of her own accounts, and to find her right? Every word I said to you was mine. It is the only place in England I have ever been merely a man, and you made it so, and I will not give it up for the sake of a title I did nothing to earn but be born. You make being a duke sound a lonely trade. It is the loneliest trade in the kingdom," he said, "and the best paid, and no one pities us, nor do I ask that you should. I ask only that you understand why a duke would put on a plain coat and sit in the cold. It was not to trap your guardian. That was the errand. It was to be, for a little while, a man a clever woman would speak to as though his answer were not decided before he gave it. And now you have taken off the disguise. I have. and I stand here as what I am, which is a great deal of what a sensible woman ought to run from, a title and the whole weight of it, and every scheming mother in London at the door, and a cold grand life that is watched from every side. I will not pretend it is a small thing I offer, but I offer it, Miss Ashcombe, if you will have it, not because your fortune is now worth the having, for you had none in my eyes when I came and I wanted you the same, but because I have chosen you, freely, over every advantage my rank could otherwise buy me, and I would rather have you choose me back the same way, freely, out of a fortune that is your own and needs no man, than take you when you had nothing and could not say no. Marianne looked at him a long moment, the black velvet and the gold, this man who had read her freedom out of a ledger and then handed her the pen. "You have given me back the right to say no," she said. "It seems an ungrateful use of it to say yes at once." Something moved in his face that was very near to fear. "But I did not learn to read an account," she went on, "to spend the rest of my life pretending I cannot add. I have added it twice, Your Grace, as you would say. On the one side, a great cold grand life much watched, and every scheming mother in London. On the other, the one man in 6 years who taught me a thing instead of taking a thing, and who stood in a public court and gave me back to myself before he asked me for anything at all. The sum comes out the same both times." She put her hand into his, the plain hand into the hand with the heavy signet, and she did it herself, and no one made her. "I choose it. I choose you, and I did it freely. And there is a hall full of witnesses gone home who will swear I was under no man's guardianship when I did." He closed his hand over hers, and for the space of 3 heartbeats, 1, 2, 3, the man who had never had to wait at a door in his life stood and did nothing at all but hold her hand in an empty cold hall, and the cold of it was nothing to either of them. "There is a barn at Ashcombe with no roof," he said at last, unsteadily, "and the rain comes through. I have promised the court to see the account made good. I find I would rather see the barn made good in person, and stay to see the house made warm, and the fires lit in every room as they were when your father would not have a cold house. If you will let a reformed examiner audit the works." "I will let him," she said. "But I shall check his figures. I have learned that a true account balances in 2 directions, and I mean to keep him honest." "I have never wanted anything so much as to be kept honest by you," said the Duke of Herringworth, and he raised her hand, the free hand of a free woman, and he did not kiss it as a duke kisses a hand, lightly and for form, but held it to his mouth a moment as a man holds the one warm thing in a long cold winter, and outside the old hall the London afternoon was going down into evening, and for the first time in 6 years Marian Ashcombe was not cold. They were married in the spring, quietly, at Ashcombe, in the little church where her father and mother lay, and the barn had its new roof by then, laid by Josiah Meade the joiner, and paid for in full and in front of him, so that the man laughed and said he had never in his life been paid for the same barn by 2 different families, the guardian in ink that meant nothing and the duke in gold that meant everything. The fires were lit in every room. Marianne kept the household books herself in her own hand and balanced them in 2 directions every quarter, and when her husband looked over her shoulder at the neat columns she would say, "You may examine them, Your Grace, but you will find everything in order." And he would say, "That is what the last man told me." And she would say, "The last man was a thief." And he would say, "And I am only a reformed examiner who married the account." And it became a thing they said, a small private ledger of a joke between them, and it never wore out. Sir Rowland Pruitt made good the £4,000 because the court stripped him of the house in Bruton Street to do it, and lived out his years in narrow lodgings with fires he could not afford to keep, and was cold at last as he had kept another cold, and no one who had ever sat at his fine warm hearth remembered his name a year after. Mrs. Tolliver was not seen again in company. And in the second winter of their marriage, a son was born. With his father's dark hair, and his mother's habit of looking hard at a thing before he believed it, and the old master in Chancery, Sir Edmund Vane, stood godfather to him. And at the christening the dry old man held the child a moment and said, "Well, boy, your mother could not read her own account, and your father had to read it for her in open court before she was let have a shilling of it. See that you teach your own children their sums, so that no man may ever tell them their money is not their affair. It is always their affair. It is the first freedom, and the last one anybody thinks to steal. A house is not made warm by the money in its walls, but by the honesty of the hand that keeps the books. And the cruelest theft is not of a woman's fortune, but of her right to know what is hers. For a person kept from the truth of her own affairs is kept a child however old she grows, and the setting of that right is worth more than all the coal in England. If you have made it this far into the story, then it has kept you, and you are the sort who stays for the whole of a thing and not only its beginning, and I am glad of your company. So tell us in the comments which city you are watching from. And here is the question the whole tale turns upon. Would you have said yes at once in that cold, empty hall? Or would you, like Marianne, have made him wait and added the sum twice first before you gave him your hand? If these long, quiet stories keep you warm of an evening, subscribe and stay by the fire with us for the next one.